Okay, our next speaker, and I was just kidding him. I said, I can't pronounce your last name. I'm going to call you Ryan Kolo. And guess what? It's easier than I thought. It's Kolodziej. How about that? So Ryan is with us today. He was raised on a 120-acre farm on his father's home farm in rural township of Dewey, Wisconsin. He now lives on a farm and his wife of 21 years, 110 acres of her fourth generation family farm in Amherst, Wisconsin. And they believe that family neighbors are an important part of a successful farming community. Kolodziejs are known as always willing to lend a hand or a tractor. So if anybody needs a tractor right here, he'd be willing to let you use it.
Eddie?
Ryan, thank you so much for being here. We're glad to have you.
Yep.
Come on up.
This on?
Yeah.
All right. So this is some drone footage of the farm that we live on here, and some red wattle pigs there that I'm trying to feed there. So I got a couple of paragraphs here I wrote because I don't do a whole lot of speaking here. So for anyone that doesn't know, well, he just introduced me. Kolodziej, that's Polish for wheelwright. And like he said, my wife and I were lifetime Wisconsinites. And if you don't know Wisconsinite, that's American for awesome. See? Yeah. All right. So my love for beer and cheese is only superseded by a few. Superseded. That's a regenerative agriculture joke, right? Superseded. Anyway, by a few things. So my love for nature and my love for farming are a couple of those things that are more important than just enjoying a couple of brews and a couple cheese curds. So in 2016, the pursuit of nature and farming in land management practices kind of culminated in bringing the farmer, the foodie, and the naturalist that I had become to name our farm Epic Nature. So what does epic nature mean? Right here. So this was corn and beans rotation for generations. So when we moved out here in 2003, the neighbor was farming this, paying $15 an acre to put a Roundup Ready corn in here and spray herbicides, and we're just like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I had the bright idea to build my own no-till device by taking an old pickup truck and taking the spare tire, which was not from the pickup truck, it was little, we call them pizza cutters, and putting that on there, just the bare rim, running up and down this field here where the corn stubble was, and these trees were all seeded naturally from a variety of different things. You can kind of see there's a few different varieties. There's maples, box elders, poplars, oak trees. So the reason we did this was when we took over, we tried to get someone, I didn't have the machinery to plant this in alfalfa or to farm it conventionally. It was, even back then, 10 years ago, it was, we were quoted $400 or $500 an acre to seed this down, and to seed down 20 acres, I just couldn't come up with the cash, so we tried to figure out a way to use this property without any inputs. So we did this no-till. It was corn, beans, and sunflowers that after we run the pickup truck, it was creating these what do they call this? Micro swales. I don't know if that's, it's just the pressure from the weight of the truck on that rim was creating this little tiny ditch that was, maybe 3-4 inches deep and maybe 3 or 4 inches wide. And as we were driving, someone could just broadcast the seed off the back of the truck down this. And you can go 25, 30 miles an hour creating this micro swale, throwing the seeds in there. And what ended up happening was the tree seeds all blew in, and there was enough soil contact that the next spring we had trees coming up in rows. After everyone was hassling my father-in-law, they come by and see me doing this, and they say, what's that guy doing out there in the field? All right, and they say, none of that's going to grow. Well, it come up in rows, so joke's on them. What's that? You want me on the stage? That's going to frighten me. Can I be down here? Well, now the lights are in my eyes. This is terrible. I brought a prop here to show you guys, because when we first come in here, they were talking about social media and stuff, and so this is my $10 Walmart tripod, and I got a phone here so that we can show you guys exactly how this is done. Turn your phones off, right, folks? Oh, here, selfie with the crowd. All right, I'm here in Greeneville, Tennessee at the Regenerative Agriculture Alliance Summit, making a fool of myself up on stage here, and we're talking about low input farming. So that goes right on social media. I mean, it's simple, folks. You know, now I'm losing it. I got one more paragraph here. We'll get back to some of that. So farming is, to be successful in farming, it's not just hard work, it's philosophy. And I grew up in a tight-knit community, large Polish family farm. My wife came from Polish immigrant farm, and it's community, that everyone lends a hand. And for all of us to be here together, sharing our stories and stuff like that, that's the important part of this type of thing being successful. If one of us is successful in regenerative agriculture, or doing something like this where we're converting a row crop into silvopasture, that we need to be out there sharing that experience. And I'm glad to come down here and share it with you guys. A simple hillbilly from Wisconsin. What do I know about farming? I didn't even know I was a regenerative agriculture guy until last year. So we're running pigs in here now. And the business model part of this, the money making part of this is no longer going to be constant inputs. I'm not going to be out there with a tractor. I'm not going to be out there with a seeder. I got my pigs running out there. And before, if we were getting paid, even if we made $100 an acre in rent, that's only $2,000. What does $2,000 get you? Nothing. So the value added is not in the processed pork. It's in when I put my videos out there on social media, and I say, hey, I've got piglets for sale. People come to my social media, they look at this and say, I want to buy pigs from that farm, because they're out there running in a natural type setting. They're farrowing out there. I got a text message this morning from the person watching the farm. We got babies being born, right now. So not only is it stressful up here in the lights, but I'm worried about my pigs back home, taking care of their babies. In wine, it's terroir, right? Am I saying that right? It's the soil. So what we've done here is we've changed the entire farm's appearance to, it's not just pork anymore to people that are buying a pig from us. They have a story. They feel connected with not just the animal, but with the land and with the family farm and all that stuff. So if you're going to be successful in converting your conventional farm to regenerative agriculture, it's not just the soil. It's not just improving the water quality. It's about, you've got to make money too, or else you're not going to be in business very long. So you take that opportunity where you've changed what you've done in such a way that, the neighbor's field over there is, still conventional soybeans. If I put a sign out here on the front yard and said, I've got rhubarb or raspberries or whatever else perennials that we're growing, and he's got the same sign, they're going to stop at my farm and buy my stuff first because they're going to get the assumption that I'm under, you know, different type of practice or a more, you know, a more sustainable or regenerative type of practice. All right. The micro swale and the seeding of the corn, the beans, and the sunflowers drew in an incredible amount of wildlife. What you're not seeing here is there's asparagus growing out in there. And I put on my Facebook, I took a little video, okay, which one of you hippies is out here in my field planting asparagus? You know, because this is incredibly diversified on accident. I was not trying to accomplish this when I did my no-till seeding. Okay, well, I probably shouldn't have told you that because now, you know, who's going to believe the guy that, you know, did it all by accident? But seriously, the cover crop of grains brought in all of the turkeys, the deer, and all the things that are going to bring other seeds in there to get this diversified. You can't really see it in this picture, but you know, towards the back of the field is more maples, and along this side there's, you know, you've got these must be blue spruce that the neighbor planted, and you know, down here there's a red pine. So it's diversified based on how the seeds were coming in, but also seeds were being brought in by all the wildlife that were attracted to what we had going on in there. I could point at this, but I don't think that you'd be able to see what it is. All right, well, my 3 paragraphs are up. Let's see if I can tell you guys some stories. The first thing that we did was we started out hatching eggs. We got some chickens. We were selling pullets, all right, to make a buck. And there's an incredible amount of time involved in selling, you know, chickens to, you know, they want 3 hens at a time. So there you are on a Saturday waiting for people to come get 3 chickens. Well, there's money in it, but that didn't work out. We had really large gardens trying to do market farming, another really labor-intensive and time-intensive, you know, on a Saturday. You sit there all day, sell a couple $100 worth of fruits and vegetables. So 10 years into our project, it's like, hey, I've got to figure out a way to do, you know, use this property in a way that, one, doesn't take up a lot of time and doesn't take up a lot of money or input. So this is what we came up with. It may not be, you know, this is Wisconsin, and you can see that there's a lot of trees everywhere. It's you know, we got good rainfall, and it's frozen 6 months out of the year, so there isn't a lot of invasive species. So this may not be working in wherever you are, but there should be some way, you know, to get native species established. And the first place I would start would be in fence rows, that you could easily expand any fence row. Any field, you know, has a fence row. You could just, you know, start by putting in swales along your fence rows to try and establish more native cover. What does that do? Well, it reduces your amount of tillable acreage, so it's definitely going to affect your pocketbook. But again, now you're saying, hey, look at what I'm doing. You're setting yourself apart from your competitors by, you know, putting in those native margins and stuff like that. You're also, you know, reducing your input. And with, you know, they were saying earlier about the price of fertilizers, I can't imagine in a drought year going out, spending the money on fertilizer and seed up front, and, you know, your crop insurance isn't going to cover, you know, any of those inputs this year unless you really paid a lot of money for it. So this isn't necessarily a success, you know, a tale about success, as it is about opportunity, where my wife just happened, my beautiful and talented wife, in the back there, she inherited this property. So she was a trust fund baby. She was a land trust fund baby. So this is what we did with our opportunity. we can't scale this. We can't go out and just get another 100 acres. It's not something that will be easily duplicated, because who has those type of opportunities? But anyone that has opportunities, that if your family is generational farmers and you can take a piece of property and wait 10 years to turn it into something like this, you're doing something that's far beyond what other people have ever imagined doing with their farms. And we're constantly doing tours. People come out, they're like, I really want to do what you're doing. It's like, well, it's going to take a little time to be converting anything that's conventional row crop into a silvopasture, but you can do it slowly and you can do it successfully. The most profitable thing that we've done is not the pigs, it's perennial crops. And over the last 10 years, we've slowly been expanding our perennial crops. We make more money in a 1/4 acre of rhubarb than we were off of renting out the entire 20 acres before. All right? So when you're trying to convert land and you're trying to figure out what's the best way to go about doing something, it's test your markets. Be constantly out there testing all of your different markets. We did all kinds of things. When we were first together, we moved out here in 2003, right after we were married, and our friends were still in college, and they're like, hey, let's come out and plant big gardens and all this stuff. And it's fun to do that. Everyone was eating good, but there wasn't any cash flow from that. So you got to move on. You can't get stuck on, hey, I want to do this because I think that this is what regenerative agriculture means to me, because if you get stuck in that rut, you're going to end up 5, 10, 15 years down the line doing the same thing and not making any money. As much as I'd like to say, hey, I'm going to be doing this type of thing forever, if someone offers me a bunch of money and they want to put a subdivision in there, well, there might be a subdivision going in there, because you got to be able to take care of yourself. Take that money, go somewhere else where land is cheap, start over and do this again with a different piece of property. Well, how far am I in here? Not too far yet? Got 15 minutes? And then 10 minutes after that for questions? Oh man, they didn't tell me this was going to be this hard. Well, let me just tell you a quick story about how we got down here from Wisconsin. We loaded up our pickup truck with a double-decker, like they carry sled dogs or bird dogs or something like that, and we stopped in Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and then we ran up and dropped off pigs in Virginia. All of this rare red wattle hog. So selling the seed stock on the way down here has paid for our whole trip. But it also left me a little burnt out, because we got 30 hours on the truck. Roll into coming back into Bristol about 2 a.m. last night. It's like I got to catch some sleep and then get over there, get up on stage, and make a fool of myself. So that's, I think my bio says I've got a lot of irons in the fire, and that's how farming should be. That you got to stay diversified. You got to keep after it. You got to be testing different markets. Last fall, when we were on a tour down here to drop off pigs, I saw this ad. They're looking for a hog. If you were here last year and had some of the pig roast, that was a hog that come from our farm. And we were coming down through here. He's like, well, it's got to be dropped off at this butcher in Greeneville. You're already all the way in Wisconsin. I'm like, well, I'll be driving through there anyway. Well, what do we owe you for the hog? Nothing. Why not? It's an opportunity to, for one, get myself in trouble, and now I got to speak this year. But it's also to promote the red wattle breed, and it's like I said before, it's kind of a fellowship that you're out there connecting with all these different people that are likewise. At the butcher shop, we rolled in, and there's Kevin Jacoby standing there, who donated the pig this year. And he's standing there, and he's like, "You're from Wisconsin Plates, delivering a hog down here in Tennessee. What's that about?" We started talking. He's like, "Let me get a notepad." And then he wants to know about all the different fencing types that I'm using and all the different techniques that I'm using to use pigs on silvopasture, because you can't tell that there's pigs in there except for where they really overwinter. And that's just like any type of grazing management, that you got to keep your density right. If I was running 1,000 hogs out there, there wouldn't be anything green out there. But you start running 10, 15 sows on a 20-acre parcel, and you can't even tell that they were there. They're growing in a completely natural environment. They love life. As you're watching the video, there's one where the drone comes down. I think it's right before this, if you scroll back about 30 seconds. Yep. So, I mean, this is a pig wallow. And people are like, pigs destroy and root up everything. It's like, I don't know about that. You give them enough space that, and sows are a little bit different than feeder pigs. Smaller pigs are a lot more aggressive with rooting. But once you get your older pigs established on a property, they really don't, they're not out there to destroy. And we don't rotate our pigs because they rotate themselves. County come out, was hassling me about this, because there's a waterway back there, and I said, go out there and try and find a fresh pile of shit to step in. They're talking about all this other stuff. Right? When people ask me how many hogs we have, the first thing I ask them, you with the county? Is it time for questions?
If you want to do some questions, yeah, raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you. Way back in the back. That's okay. All right.
Well, that you got.
So my name is Sandy, and I have a 90-acre spread out on Myers Acres Lane. I'm going to do horses. So my question to you is, you're talking about silver pasture. What do you mean when you say silver pasture?
Silvopasture? I Googled it. So I mean.
Okay, I'm asking you Google.
You know as much as I do about silvopasture. It's trees that I let grow in my cornfield.
Say again.
Trees that I let grow in my cornfield.
What kinds of trees?
So this is just the native spread in central Wisconsin. It's maples and oaks, box elders, in the maple family, and it's kind of a tree that you can't really kill. The pigs, even in the spots where we've had the pigs, in there with the highest density for the longest time, that actually the white clover and the box elder seem to be a really good combination for even a higher density hogs. This is in the winter time, or actually springtime, and you can see it ain't very pretty.
No.
But once the trees come in there, you can't see all my junk.
Is it okay if I ask another question? I mean, if anybody else has got a question, please don't let me hog the mic. You make your money with pigs, correct? By selling piglets.
I'm not losing money with pigs.
Okay, that's fair enough.
The rhubarb is extremely profitable, and we're talking like, if you're looking at profit margin, that we started with, 10 years ago, I looked around and I'm like, well, I've failed at growing just about everything but the rhubarb. Let's start to expand the rhubarb.
So how much rhubarb are you growing then? And is that specifically to Wisconsin that you're making money off of rhubarb?
Everybody grows rhubarb in Wisconsin, so it was kind of a shock to me that I would make money doing it. But you can't go to a winery or we're selling them to people that use them as natural flavorings. You can't go to them and say, hey, do you want to buy a ton of rhubarb? And then say, well, give me 6 or 7 years to grow a ton of rhubarb. You got to grow the patch of rhubarb first, and then you can go out there and start testing those markets. Again, where my father-in-law is like, Ryan, what you doing growing all this rhubarb?
Yeah.
But we have, about 1,000 plants, and if they're spaced 3 foot on center, that it's 4,900 plants per acre. So we have about 1,000 plants in a couple different patches. So we have the capacity to pick, upwards of, 10,000 pounds of rhubarb. We sold a ton of rhubarb just on the roadside stand for $2 a pound. And in the good producing patches, it's a pound per square foot. So an acre would be, if I had that much ambition, if I planted an acre of rhubarb, that you're looking at 40,000 pounds per acre of rhubarb, which would be $80,000. And a motivated guy like myself or my cousin's kids, when I pay them by the pound, they're making, my cousin's high school kids, they're out there making $35 an hour picking rhubarb for me because they get after it. If I pay them 50 cents a pound and they go and pick, 50, 60 pounds an hour, and for a person that's growing their own rhubarb, if I'm getting paid $2 a pound, if I'm picking 50 pounds an hour, I'm making $100 an hour in my backyard every morning picking rhubarb.
So are you picking it and harvesting it yourself with just your family?
No, this is for either the roadside stand, or we'll get, I don't know if I should say this, but all the local CSAs, early in the spring, they don't have a lot to put in their boxes, and they know we've got rhubarb, so they'll call me up and say, hey, can I get a couple 100 pounds of rhubarb to put in our CSA box this week? But we also had, siren shrubs, so they make a flavored vinegar, and they use our rhubarb as a flavoring for the vinegar, so they take a ton of rhubarb at a time. So you got to go out there and find the market. You got to be, if you see someone out there that has a product that could be, a value add, that you just give them a call. We sold pork to Rare Steakhouse down in Milwaukee that we can't even afford to have a cocktail at, but I saw they've got this actual from Japan Wagyu beef. So I called them up and said, hey, you want to try some red wattle pork? Well, sure enough, they want to try some red wattle pork. But it's only because I had the nerve to call them up and say, hey, and then there I was in the butcher shop taking pictures of the cuts. They cut a pork chop. I had the chef there on the phone. Do you want to cut like this? Nope. All right, cut a different one. I'm in the butcher shop to make sure this is done right so that I can make sure that my new customer has exactly what he wants.
Interesting.
I don't think I answered your question.
I think you did. I think you did. I'm not sure that I have a whole bunch more.
All right.
Yeah.
Hi,
No, that's fine.
my name is Kiki, and what would you advise for someone who's just starting out? Because those first 2 years, you can go under or not. So what's the most profitable way to start and sustain yourself to where you can move out to other things, but chickens, pigs, what others can you raise, and rhubarb, and what crops would you recommend?
If we were to start over where we had to go and purchase a piece of property, we'd buy a rundown shack, a fixer-upper that had some property that was flat. You look for some flat land. Don't be buying hilly, rocky stuff. Go get you a decent property, and then start with things that are easy to propagate. Anything that's a perennial. I mean, in this picture, you can see down in the corner, we've got perennial flowers going right by the corner of the road.
And
There's
your family has a pretty large piece, and this lady over here has got a nice section, but for maybe a smaller family with 20 acres or less, what is the most efficient way for them to get on their feet and continue being successful?
Don't spend any money right away. Really, no overhead. If anyone wants the secret to running a successful business, zero overhead. Well, that means that you're out in your neighbor's garden in the middle of the night, digging up his oregano and mint and moving it to your garden.
Well, without going that far, can you recommend chickens or pigs or rhubarb or what?
Well,
those three things?
chickens are,
And then I'm going to hand this off to someone else.
Well, I'm going to make a YouTube video just for you. I'm going to make a YouTube video just for you about how we built our first incubator. Because I bought a Chinese incubator. It worked for a couple rounds. The heating element went out and wasn't going to deal with that. Took an old refrigerator, converted it into, it was a bathroom fan, a thermostat, and I think it was a 60 watt bulb, and that's where we were hatching out, 200 eggs at a time. kind of a low, it's not as good as the, hand turning them is not as good as a regular incubator is going to do, but we were hatching like 50%. And you've got, it's hard to sell eggs at certain times of the year, so when you have a surplus of eggs and you've got a rooster, well, you have fertile eggs, throw them in the incubator, hatch them out, put them out there on Craigslist, and you're always going to get some sucker that wants to buy some pullets. Everybody wants to raise eggs at some point in their life. And a lot of people don't know how to care for them, so they're going to have raccoons killing their birds. They'll be back buying chickens from you every month. Job security.
Hello, Ryan. Kevin Jacoby.
There he is.
Land Basket Farm. I would like, this question is for you, but it's also for anybody else here in the crowd. Among other things, we raise pasture-raised pork, but really it's raised in the woods at Land Basket Farm, and we hopscotch hogs throughout a wood lot. And, one of the challenges, whether you tinker with stocking rate or whether you tinker with how long you leave animals on a plot of ground, and I think everybody, you're always going to fight soil compaction when you're talking about that. So I'd like your thoughts on how to mitigate soil compaction. The classic is, like Jordan Green, you can sow stuff behind the hogs, and that's great in June, but a brassica, like a radish or something like that, does well with helping mitigate soil compaction. But you're not going to get that junk in the ground in June because it's not going to grow. So any thoughts on how do you mitigate soil compaction in a silvopasture environment?
So we're lucky enough that our ground is frozen 6 months out of the year. So that freeze-thaw cycle is always heaving the soil, and you always get that drainage. And right here, it looks like there's soil compaction there, but you can go take a fiberglass, one of them push-in sticks, and poke it right in the ground. For hard clay soils, I don't have enough experience to even begin to try and tackle that problem. We're delivering pigs to all these people down here, and I go and look at their yard, and I'm just like, man, that looks rough, because it's the soil's so hard to start with that the pigs can't even root in it. So when you're talking soil compaction on clay, it's pretty compacted already. So I would think that the pigs themselves, if you're, like the hay bomb, where wherever you'd overwinter your animals, that you could slowly, right here in the center of the screen here on the right here, that whole thing is gone now, all right? And nope, not that one, the one over the other, that's all gone. And I just took down all the buildings, went and threw a bunch of sunflowers, pumpkin seed, corn seed, right before I moved the pigs. The day before, they went and ate all the stuff, poked some seeds in the ground, got some soil contact, moved them out of there, and now I've got a pumpkin patch and corns and sunflowers going there. So, soil compaction it's a real issue with any type of livestock. So it's trial and error, observation, innovation, what everyone really talks about it.
Okay. I realize your trees are still fairly young, but do you have a revenue stream coming out of the tree component of the farm yet? And what do you envision in the future as the revenue stream? Because that's a big part of your solar
I should have
panel.
wrote this one down. Thank you. This is. Are you working with me?
I haven't been paid yet.
I have maple syrup. There's a couple jars of maple syrup in the truck. All right. These box elders can be tapped at 6 to 8 inches, and because they're so dense that if we ever kick these pigs out of here and want to run vacuum lines, that we could put, I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be hundreds of taps per acre, and your yield is going to be somewhere around a quart or two of syrup per tap. So if you wanted to set this up as a sugar bush, what we would call a stand of maples, that this could easily become that type of revenue stream. Box elders are not a straight growing tree. There won't ever be any good timber. It's kind of a hardwood, so you can use it for firewood. But yes, this could easily become a sugar bush if we ever wanted to just drop the hogs altogether. Thank you.
You mentioned social media.
Social media.
So what do you use primarily to advertise, if anything?
So last year when I opened my big mouth and got myself in trouble bringing a hog down here, and we come down and met these great folks, they asked me to come speak. We went home and I searched for someone that could help me out with social media. So we found a guy that I had graduated high school with that was a photographer, and I said, can you come help me out for a year? And I'll tell you right now, I wrote him a check for $5,000. And my wife's like, oh, what? But what is he going to do? He's going to make that cute little logo you see flashing on there. You know, he's going to teach me how to edit film. He's going to show me how to use, you know, all these different gadgets. He's going to help me get myself electrocuted, telling me to talk at the camera while I'm hooking on, you know, unhooking and rehooking the electric fence, explaining it. You know, he had the drone. I got a drone now, so it's not just social media, it's media, multimedia, how to do all this stuff. That, you know, here, learning how to use the controls, to pan this, to show that, you know, getting all the different looks, you know, as, you know, when you're showing the first thing where I'm standing there, showing the lake. So this is, you know, this is all part of how to work what you have. It doesn't cost you any money because you already bought the property. You know, you can go and spend hundreds of dollars on signage for your, you know, and on the roadside, or you can hire a professional that's going to teach you how to do all this, and that's going to stick with you for the rest of your life. So, Facebook, Craigslist, everywhere. You know, now that we have a YouTube channel, I'm spamming everyone's stuff on Facebook with my links. I don't know how many different groups I've been blocked from already. You know, anytime anyone asks a question on a hog thing about fencing, there I am with a little clip of me getting electrocuted. You know, come check out my YouTube channel.
Can you talk about, you obviously are great with the low overhead deal. So related to food stuff in the wintertime, how are you handling that for free or at a low cost? I mean, I'm just on your point of
hogs are terrible. I mean, hogs are the worst. They eat a fortune, and
right.
And it is a constant battle with, you know, I mean, everyone sources their feed wherever they can get it. Bulk is always the best. We've got a gravity wagon. We buy it from a local farmer that, you know, he grows his corn locally. So instead of him having to ship his corn down to the elevator, you can go right there and he'll sell it to you for the cash price that he would get. You know, you fill up your grain bin. Now it's $7 a bushel, but I was paying $3 a bushel when I started. There's lots of other different methods to stretch your feed where there's a study by Purdue that says that 20% of all hog feed is wasted. Well, why is it wasted? You go out there and they knock over the dish, it's in the mud. So mixing it with water, or a lot of people like to ferment. It's cold in Wisconsin, so fermenting doesn't work. I mean, I'd be waiting there until, you know, it's you can't do fermentation. So we heat with wood. There's a wood stove going in the house all the time. So whenever the pot of water that's sitting there to keep the house humidified is boiling, I dump that in a bucket of feed, mix it up. Now I've got cooked feed. There's a lot of studies that show how much, I mean, would you go and eat raw oats? I mean, if you had to, you would, but normally in the morning you cook your oats. So it's one of those things where you just research. You know, ask my wife how, you know, I'm always, someone asks a question, I have the answer, but what do? I go and research my answer before I give it to them to make sure that I've got the right stuff. You're asking that question about, you know, feed, research. Go down to the mill. Sit there at the mill. When a guy pulls up and you see that he's doing something that's kind of like what you're doing, go and pick his brain, like Jacoby did. Stand in front of my truck so I can't leave. You know? You ain't going anywhere until you answer my questions. It's really difficult. There was a good year for hay in Wisconsin this year. We got 4x6 round bales from 2020 delivered to our farm for $20 a piece. All right, so when it's cheap, you know, don't go out and don't go out to dinner. You know, don't be spending your extra money on that. Load up on hay. You know, if you've got to get some tarps to tarp it or stack it, or rent a skid steer from your neighbor so you can really stack it high and then tarp it, do all those things to, when it's cheap. You know, ideally we'd all have a 300 or a 3,000 bushel grain bin in our backyard, and at harvest time when corn is cheap, you'd be drying all your own corn, but we can't all do that. Where are we at? Right here?
Yeah, okay. I was wondering about the corn, what you were supplementing with corn, so he answered that. With your red wattles, are your purebred red wattles, or are you breeding with crossbreeds, or?
Are you at the Red Wattle Hog Association?
Well, no, but I'm just wondering. what to do. We used to have a lot of hogs, but we did them the conventional way. I mean, you know, farrowing crates and.
So it's low input. A lot of people look at me, they're like, man, that guy's ambitious, but really, really deep down inside, I'm a lazy guy. You know, so I really want to do things as simple as possible. I turn these sows out, they're farrowing right through winter. If I'm averaging, you know, weaning 7-8 piglets a litter, so if I'm averaging 15 piglets a sow, and you're farrowing crates, and you're averaging 25, all right, I've never shoveled a single, I grew up on a dairy farm, so I've shoveled my share of shit, but not with the pigs. I'm not going to do that. They're gonna be out there doing it all themselves, hands off. How many hours do I spend out there waiting for the piglets to come? I'm down here in Tennessee, and I got pigs farrowing back in Wisconsin. You know, talk about hands off. I'm not even in the same state to have it happen. And there are going to be piglets crushed. There are going to be piglets lost. My mortality rate is very high, and I get hassled about it from the association.
Oh, okay.
You know,
no, I'm not with you.
But in the end, how much input do I have into these hogs? I got to go out there. I like to hand feed, just because it keeps the animals, you know, a little bit calmer and easier to load and stuff like that. So I don't do automatic feeders.
All the old timers around us used to do hogs like this, but then everybody got away from it because. Don't ask me why.
Well, I can grow 1,000 hogs in a pretty small area if I have all automatic waters, feeders, and a shed over them. But how much am I going to get? Go down to Equity Livestock Exchange, and they're going to give me 60 cents a pound on them. Where here I can put these on Facebook. Say, hey, I'm coming down to Tennessee. You guys want some pigs? And there's a lot of people that are like, hey, I'll take a couple gilts. I'll tell you right now, we're getting $250 to deliver these gilts. Well, how much for delivery? Nothing. You're going to come all the way from Wisconsin and deliver them for nothing? Well, I got a truckload of pigs, and I'm already on my way. You know, what did it take for me to deliver them hogs? It really didn't take me.
So, are these feeder pigs you're selling?
When I come out of state, it's mostly gilts, breeding trios and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Seed stock.
Okay. Now, what do you? Now, are your gilts ready to breed?
No, they all I ship them when they're, you know, between 30 and 50 pounds, so I can fit as many in the truck as possible. I've got a tandem axle trailer that I can drag down here, but that makes me a miserable person. Ask my wife.
Yeah.
I'm really fun when I'm pulling a trailer.
Do you do anything for predation?
You at the county?
No, no.
So the perimeter fence is a woven wire fence, and then we've got a hot wire inside. And because we don't have our wild, the wild margins on the land are not fenced into the pen. So the coyotes, the few wolves that we do have, the bear or whatever, they stay away from the fence because, You know, if they get 15 joules once in a while, they're not interested in going and messing with that. So predation is nothing we've never, I mean, the chickens is terrible. I mean, there's that water running there, and I don't know if you guys have fisher cats, know what those are? It's a giant weasel. They can grow to be like 15, 20 pounds. You'll see them up in a pine tree eating a gray squirrel, you know, like a popsicle in the winter.
No, we don't have them.
Follow me on YouTube. I'll make you a video.
All right. Okay.
So predation is a problem for that's why we don't have chickens anymore, because over the past 20 years, I bet you we've lost pretty close to 1,000 birds. And that usually happens in the springtime when, like our Muscovy ducks, they'll have 15 little ones running behind them, and all of a sudden the next day they're gone. Or they'll just eat the hens right off the nest. That the weasels, the mink, the fishers, they'll go seek them out wherever they are, and they'll eat your birds. But for the hogs, we don't have.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Time to kick me out.
No, not yet. You got a few more minutes. You got 30 more minutes. No, not that much. Don't say that. These guys are going to fight him for hunger. Doing a great job.
I'm running on 16 hours sleep since we left on Sunday, so I'm about ready for a nap.
All right, any other questions for Ryan? We got one more right over there.
Have you ever considered honeybees as a?
Can you speak up?
Have you ever considered honeybees to add to your farm?
So, funny story. Are we working together? My father, when I was growing up, he'd have a semi of hives that he would take around, and he was actually president of the Portage County Beekeepers Association for a number of years, and I've been stung hundreds of times. That's why I don't have arthritis. I have arthritis. You can get stung as many times as you want. Bees are a great idea, but unless you're in a warmer climate or you're out in Hawaii or something like that, where you don't have to deal with the hive collapse, where any amount of stress on your hives, you get the mites in there, and they just you just can't. I mean, you're buying queens, you're buying more brood. Every single spring you're having to replace half your hives every year, and no one will pay you anything for honey. I don't know if you guys have you raised bees? Have you had? Yeah, there's no money in it. I mean, it's worse than hogs. So I mean, so in Wisconsin, they talk a lot about native pollinators. So, honeybees, I don't really, everybody loves the honeybee, but I don't consider it it's not an essential part of running our farm. Having the wild margins, having the wild area that, you can come on our farm and there's not a whole lot of flies because there's lots of birds, but seasonally you'll have the pollinators coming out. Throughout the summer, you've got an incredible amount of bumblebee activity. You've got all kinds of these other little types of bees, which I have no idea what their scientific names are, but there's dozens of different varieties of bees or other types of pollinators that work just as good. I'd love to raise honeybees, mostly because I like getting stung, but it's not in our current model.
Okay, is that it? Any other questions? All right, Ryan, thank you very much. Appreciate it.